Ngā mihi koutou katoa. Welcome back to those of you who have been with us today at the crazy and ambitious Kauri Land Summit. For those of you who are joining us for the first time for this session, no mai haere mai. We've been really working hard to keep on time because it's so interesting, but I'm going to hand it over to our amazingly fabulous chair, Sophie Jerram, to take us through our last session today, integrated surveillance. I'm really excited to hear what they will be saying. So, kia ora.
Kia ora, Nick. So, ngā mihi o te whangaoiatara, coming from Wellington Central, and reaching out around the country, if not the world. The Integrated Surveillance team has developed a mātauranga Māori framework for surveillance in New Zealand that considers the Te Tiriti or Waitangi partners. So the environment-centric surveillance framework focuses on developing web-based tools that recognise custodians and sovereign authority of biosecurity intelligence and how surveillance data and information can be stored, used and protected. So the research uses the Phytophthora agriculata that causes Kauri dieback and myrtle rust as case studies to test a proof of disease freedom model. This provides the basis for a simulation of up-to-date, accurate data regarding the extent of the diseases and the state of native bioheritage affected by the pathogens. So we have a video from the team.
So I was involved in that project in its early stages when we were still trying to shape the project and its research direction. I was collaborating with Waitangi Wood and Dean Anderson, and really Waitangi had this wish or this feeling, something very strong in her, that she wanted to change the way we do surveillance and research and science so that we could elevate Mātauranga Māori and Mana Whenua into the space.
We focused on data sovereignty and cultural sovereignty and understanding how we can ensure that Mana Whenua, within the context of equity, are able to access their own information and data, or information and data about their taonga or research that's occurring within their respective areas. So the theme originated with a Mātauranga Māori framework. The Mātauranga Māori framework looked at how we can equitably elevate Mātauranga Māori into the science system and Mana Whenua into the research and science space.
This involved a lot of conversation with our kaitiaki that were involved in the myrtle rust and Kauri dieback response. And an important aspect that always came out in those conversations was that Mana Whenua and kaitiaki always felt disconnected from the decisions that were made about their land, and they didn't have access to the data or the information that they needed to actually do surveillance on the ground and manage their land. The idea there was really to create a platform where we could have a better sharing of data and information. And that was the case for everyone, for Crown Research Institute, for agencies, but also for Mana Whenua to access the data and the information that they needed to manage their land. But key to this work was also trying to protect the information that needs to be protected or that is sensitive, and to ensure that aspects such as Maori data sovereignty is respected.
So data sovereignty is extremely important to our own communities because it allows us to participate, to engage, to be able to influence. Information and data around, so if I take the example of biosecurity and say myrtle rust, at the moment there are volumes of data and information being generated by agencies and researchers. Māori have no access to that information and data, but as a right, we have the right to make decisions about things that impact on our taonga, on our people, and not having that information and data disadvantages us.
So I came in to kind of initially to support Waitangi with the documentation of the biodiversity management areas, or what we call the BMAs. And so Y and I engaged into a search for all the documents that described these areas. And these are sort of physical areas that were identified through Maori Social Development Act back in the 50s, I think. And basically there is all these descriptions that have been published in the New Zealand Gazette, and they describe the exact boundaries of each one of these BMAs.
When we were working with the information and data, what we realised that one of the key things for that is giving that information and data whakapapa. So in order to recognise the sovereignty of the information and data, we need to recognise its whakapapa back to the whenua, or to the naturescape, or to the water. We looked for different types of ways Māori and non-Māori have described land areas, land management areas. What they do is they allow us to anchor the information and data back to the whenua. So recognising in the first instance the whenua's sovereignty, and then the mana whenua attached to that whenua. In order for us to make good decisions at home, in our place, around our taonga, in order to inform our other people, it's useful for us to actually have the current information and data so that we too can provide those solutions and support to those agencies and groups that are trying to address these issues. And so the Integrated Intelligence Platform is a digital tool that allows us to make those distinctions, separate out the sovereignty and custodian of that information and data in a way that benefits both parties.
It just, the lifespan of data that is only used by the person that collected it is so short. I mean, it's so important, and we put so many resources into collecting data that it should be available to, and especially to the place where it comes from, to the people that is directly involved with.
Yeah, it was impressive. As a data analyst, I was never really trained around data sovereignty. It wasn't even something that we had at school or at university. We never mentioned this word, and I think it's something I started to be aware of when I moved to New Zealand, because there are conflicts around this data sovereignty, different vision with Western data sovereignty and Maori data sovereignty. But I never really included any of this in my work before working into that project. And then being involved in this project and starting to work with Maori, I started to realize how important it was. And I started to feel a little shame of not having thought about all those issues before.
We are the Indigenous people of New Zealand. Those taonga and the control, the management, the caretaking or kaitiaki of those things is afforded to us in Te Tiriti o Waitangi. We have an expectation under Article 2. We have sovereign authority over those data, taonga and information as afforded to us by Te Tiriti o Waitangi, and the obligations set in place between the government and mana whenua.
The thing with this, with all this theme of the challenge, what we're really trying is to do new way of research and to find new way of working together. I guess it's really rewarding to be part of that, and I really love the values that are put forward: this respect, kindness, open-mindedness, and yeah, all working towards the same goal. And obviously there are some issues that we need to solve in that path. It's not a linear path, but yeah, it's really beautiful to see all those amazing people getting together with such strong value in the background.
Kia ora koutou, that's beautiful film, and big ups to Manaaki, who I see directed that, and many of them, I think. They're really, really fascinating and connecting in, I think, to some of the themes that Jack was pointing to at the beginning of this afternoon about sharing credit and understanding, as Waitangi says, the data whakapapa, as well as the sovereignty itself. I'm introducing Cecilia Arienti-Latham. She's a quantitative ecologist featuring in this film. She's a quantitative ecologist at Manaaki Whenua since 2012. Before that, she was in Canada, where she did a Masters of Science in Environmental Science at the University of Alberta. During her time off, she enjoys spending time with her husband and 3 kids in their rural property in north of Christchurch. And Celia is called co-design of a surveillance strategy for Kauri dieback. Kia ora.
Kia ora koutou. My name is Cecilia, and thanks for presenting me. And today I'm going to describe the process we've gone through in co-designing a surveillance strategy for Kauri dieback. And first of all, I would like to acknowledge the people that were involved in this process. So it's not just me. It's also Nari Williams and Julian Chetam and Ari Carrington, Steve Johnson, Waitangi Wood, Dean Anderson, and Audrey Lustig. So there is Nari from Plant and Food, the Kaitiaki from Patuharakeke, and my co-workers at this integrated surveillance team. So why co-designing surveillance? I guess because most of all, it involves all the parties in the conversation. So the researchers, the mana whenua, the community. So anyone that has an interest in the taonga or the biodiversity that we're trying to preserve. But it also elevates local knowledge. So it helps us understand or focus in the places where surveillance is most needed. It also helps the local community of mana whenua to increase their capability building, so their capacity learning to be scientists themselves. And very importantly too, it increases the longevity of the data. So it doesn't stop with a researcher when the funding ends. It goes beyond that. It puts it back to the mana whenua, the people that live on the ground, and they can keep on collecting the data. And that's going to help them understand or keep managing their forest. And now go through the example how we went through this design of the surveillance strategy for Patuharakeke in the north of the North Island. The first step in the co-design process was to look at all the different areas within a forest, within their hapu or rohi, and prioritize which areas they were more keen on starting the surveillance process in. Once they identified the area where they wanted to focus on, there was a process that went through looking at oblique imagery where all the emerging kauri trees in that forest were identified individual by individual. From that big lot of trees, there was identified the mana whenua, so the people on the ground, the people that live there, identified the areas that they thought, because not every tree can be sampled, they'd identified the areas that were most significant, as well as the areas where they couldn't really go because they didn't have access or it was too remote. Out of that, those areas where the work could actually be done, so could be accessed, we went back to the computer and did a random selection of the trees to ensure that sample of trees was going to be representative of the whole forest that we couldn't necessarily do the census on. And the trees were selected for soil and visual assessment. Once that sample of tree was selected, we went back to the mana whenua. We met back with the mana whenua and the researchers, and we all agreed whether that was an appropriate sample or was representative, or was there any specific area that was missing, so we had to go back. So it was an iterative process, going backwards and forwards as to, we were all researchers in Mana Whenua, and we're happy with what was going to be done in the on the ground. Finally, the individual sample locations, once they were all agreed, were uploaded onto a survey application, and the Mana Whenua was trained in using the survey application themselves, so doing the survey themselves up in the ground. And there was also, and this is using a survey 123, it's an application, and it not only allows Mana Whenua to collect data that maybe the researchers are interested in, they also have the capacity of including additional things that they might want to collect. So there is a training involved in using it and customizing the application to their needs. Finally, we also, in collaboration with the Mana Whenua, created an online application that they could use to plan their daily surveillance, so what areas they would go on each day. And this is just what it looks like in terms of mapping and in images. And so from a sample of, let's say, 10,000 trees that were present in or were identified from satellite imagery, there was a random selection, which is shown by the light blue points. Those were uploaded into the Survey 123 app, which is just a small picture of what it looks like. And that can be uploaded into a tablet, and the tablet could be taken into the field, and that's where the data collection process occurs. And finally, there is the online application that shows which points have been done and what not. So what are the next steps in this process is we're going to duplicate or repeat the approach in other priority Kauri forests in other BMAs. And at the moment, the process has only been done for Kauri dieback, but it's going to be extended to middle rust. And we're also going to be including cultural indicators that have been identified by Mana Whenua from different areas as being important to them. And as part of this process, there is the building capacity or the capability. So in collecting the data, as well as using that data that they collect for better biosecurity and biodiversity management. And we also need to work into ensuring the compatibility of the data storage with the integrated intelligent data platform, which is what Audrey is going to be talking about right after my talk. And that is all that I had to present. And I just want to thank to Andrew McDonald, who did some of the spatial analysis, and the Takahiwa Kaitiaki. Thank you.
Kia ora. Thanks so much, Cecilia. Excellent to see. The next speaker, as Cecilia suggested, is Audrey, who's also part of the program. Audrey Lustig is a quantitative ecologist and mathematical modeler at Manaaki Whenua, focusing on understanding why species occur where they do and what global environmental change. She uses mechanistic or process-based population models that link population dynamics with environmental variability. She applies data and analysis skills to support a range of quantitative ecological disease modelling projects across regional predator-free initiatives. Bioheritage Science Challenge, DOC, Crown Research Institute's Ministry of Health, and Hapu Whenua. She's part of Punaha Matatini's modelling team that developed a series of mathematical models to inform the government's response to the COVID pandemic. So excellent to hear more integration there. Kia ora, Audrey, your presentation is called The Integrated Intelligence Platform for Plant Pathogens.
Kia ora, everyone. So I'm going to introduce you to the Integrated Intelligent Platform, or IIP. So the IIP is a special data infrastructure that allows any user to store a variety of data about biodiversity and its threat. And we are using the pathogen that cause myrtle rust and Kauri dieback as an example. It's a novel system in that it recognizes and gives effect to Maori data sovereignty by connecting any data and information to places or to the Whenua. We believe that by making this connection, we can empower Maori from this land through timely access to existing and new surveillance data and information. It also provides a mechanism for custodians to demonstrate cultural licensing by recognizing the provenance of the data and information. So how does it work? Any data and information uploaded into the platform will be place-based and anchored to a special unit that we call Biodiversity Management Areas, or BMAs. So these special units represent tribal committee area that were described in Maori narratives gazetted in 1940s under the Maori Social Economic Advancement Act. So by really associating any data with one or several BMAs, we determine the sovereignty by recognizing the provenance of the data. We are also currently working with Mana Whenua to identify tangata kokiri across all of the BMA that have been involved in the response against Kauri, dieback, and myrtle rust. So within the platform, those tangata kokiri are seen as the guardians of the data set. They have automatic access and access in perpetuity to any data that is associated with their own BMA. But more generally, we see those tangata kokiri as linkers between the custodian and the sovereign authority, in the sense that they can facilitate the establishment of cultural authority agreement, and they can ensure that Hapueniwi values that are specific to their roe is considered when we design and implement surveillance in the targeted BMAs. So it's a process still, the IAP is still in development, but how we envision it, it's going to be a data infrastructure available online that you can access from your web browser, and you will initially have to create an account. Once you come to upload data, you'll be able to upload any type of data, whether it's a document, a video, narrative, special data set, shapefile, raster. And one of the first things that will be required is to define some permission or access right. And we can view those data, we can download, we can edit the data, we can manage it. A key step will be to anchor those data to one or several BMAs. Currently, it's a manual process where you can either enter a name of a BMA or select the BMA that your data is about. And each of those BMA come with a series of metadata that are standardized across BMAs. And in particular, you'll have access to this tangata kokiri and its details, and this person will receive direct access or automatic access to the data that are linked to its BMA. We are also in the process of creating metadata and customizing those metadata so that any data set is described in a consistent way within the platform. We are building on national and international standards, but we are also including cultural and Maori metadata. And we hope that with time and with capability building, Mana Whenua will be able to develop their own metadata that are relevant to their own roe. So we're currently in the process of developing this IIP, and it's led by Dr. Sharmila Saravimutu from the Geospatial Research Institute. We're also collaborating with Pankaj Sharma and Michael Martins from the University of Auckland to add additional level of security to the platform, such as location masking, data encryption, and blockchain technology. The platform will be deployed and tested with 14 BMAs that have been involved with the response against Kauri, dieback, and myrtle rust. And really, the idea is that surveillance data can be easily accessed and contributed by anyone working in that space, but while recognizing and giving effect to Maori data sovereignty. Thank you.
Kia ora. That was terrific. Now we're going to come into a Q&A session. We're actually vaguely on time. Waitangi, is she joining us, Cecilia? Possibly not yet. Okay, all good, all good. We can direct questions generally towards her, but I've got a question that is it, I just noticed in your presentation, Cecilia, that you mentioned the working with Mana Whenua helped you establish the no-go zones. And I was just wondering if you could describe that in terms of, the definition of the no-go zones.
Well, I guess on the most simplest level is areas that they might not have any, relationship with the owner, and the owner might not be interested in allowing access for people to come and Mana Whenua to come and survey. So that's just,
okay.
Unfortunately, they deal with that. No, they don't. There is also always that private land that they can't go, or areas where they might not want. There might be sorry, I can't remember the name. Like, they might not allow people in because they are sacred areas. So there is.
That's what I was wondering. Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess I was just curious about their own methodology for identifying those zones, which is interesting for us all. Yeah. But thank you. You're writing a paper, I gather, on this.
Yes, we will. We haven't. At the moment we are working through the process, but there's many papers, but at the moment it's really just trying to get the Mana Whenua involved. And at the moment I'm actually in a training session where that's happening, where Mana Whenua is getting from several hapu around the country, they're getting introduced to the process and onboarding them onto the program.
Great, thank you. Another question for you, Cecilia. Then I'll this perhaps clip one to Audrey. When you're sampling, when will the sampling with Patuharakeke be finished, and how will your results be analysed? This is from Denise Piper.
So I'm not quite sure. They are in the process. There's about 400 trees that I think it's about 350 trees that they have to sample. So it's kind of just starting. They've done a few, so it's a ongoing process. But this is part of the Te Whakahononga program as well. So there are several BMAs that are going to be where the same sort of process is going to occur. So we're hoping that the data will eventually be all put together. But so I don't have a timeline. Unfortunately,
that's okay. Okay. Yeah. And for you, Audrey, are there any BMA in the Tamaki Makaurau, Auckland region?
They are. We're still in the process of mapping those BMAs, so they are not finite. And it's actually Cecilia who's mapping those BMAs, so I should acknowledge her work here.
Yeah, I think there's 2 or 3 around there, and we're in the. I guess there has been all the sampling done through Auckland Council in that area. Yes. In the in the forest there, so that's happened already, and yeah.
So for each, this is a question from Rebecca McDougall. For each BMA, do you receive a notification if new data is associated with it, and will this be integrated into the New Zealand biosecurity system?
So currently, the only automatic notification is for the Tangata Kokiri from that BMA. As the user, you'll be able to access metadata, but not having a direct access to the raw data itself. The access to those raw data will need to be negotiated with either the Tangata Kokiri, if it's data collected by Mana Whenua, or with the custodian who collected the data.
Okay. A final question from David Tulon to Audrey. Could your surveillance system be used for a current incursion, such as FAW? And I don't know what that means, but maybe you could explain.
So for current incursion, I don't know what is the FCW. We could use the system. We are currently limiting our case study to Kauri, dieback, and mutual rest data set, just because we had to limit the size and the scope of the database at the moment. But Waitangi always emphasize that the principle that we are developing can be used for any system or data system.
Okay, thank you. Rebecca's reply that FAW is a fall army worm. Nick, can you illuminate?
It's a recent incursion, and Ngāmihi Dave Chulon, manager of B3, that's of much importance at the moment in that idea around having the BMA in place. The BMA is in place to undertake surveillance. They're on the ground running already to contribute into these times when we're on a response. There isn't a time to often set these things up as they happen. If they're in place now, as they are being, then those people are able to look out for these new incursions. It's really building our surveillance network right through the motu, especially as some of these pests and diseases are not going to arrive where there's a lot of agencies based. So having mana whenua and community involved in surveillance is a key. And that's why this partnership in the integrated surveillance kaupapa that we've just heard empowers, enables, and actually enhances our entire biosecurity system. So to me, it makes a lot of sense.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, everybody. That was a terrific session and really interesting work you're doing. I'm going to leave it there, and Nick's going to take us to the next speaker.
Yes. Yeah, kia ora tātou. So our next speaker is the manager of the Kauri Protection Agency, which is the new government long-term management agency in place for Kauri dieback, Alan McKenzie. And unfortunately, Alan is unwell today. So our ngā mihi, sending our thoughts to Alan, but thank you for providing a pre-filmed overview of his talk today. So a bit of background about Alan. Actually, he's been involved in conservation management programs for years. He's led a lot of cross-agency collaborations as part of the national conservation effort. While at the Ministry of Culture program, he led the implementation of Landmarks, a tapestry of Aotearoa New Zealand's most significant sites and stories to uplift our visitor experience and tourism in Te Tai Tokoro in Northland and down in Otago. So over the years, Alan's been involved in many leading conservation programs and mahi across the Department of Conservation. So we wish Alan a speedy recovery, but we're going to now have his kōrero filmed. So kia ora.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Alan McKenzie tako ingoa. Good afternoon, everybody. It is great to be here at the Crazy and Ambitious virtual platform. I'm presenting on Tiakina Kauri, and my role is manager of the Tiakina Kauri team, and we're in the process of setting up a new agency. I'm going to walk you through Tiakina Kauri Protection Agency and our direction and the work that we're undertaking and the future that we see. We have displayed here our new brand, which will be launched shortly when the National Pest Management Plan comes into play. So just a quick preview of that for you. And a general description of why Tiakina Kauri Protecting Kauri is a Biosecurity New Zealand long-term initiative. In 2021, the government invested $32 million to implement a national pest management plan. This will see the establishment of Tiakina Kauri. What will we do? We're going to invest in key Kauri protection activities in partnership with Māori and collaborating with agencies such as the Department of Conservation, regional and district councils across Kauri lands. Our role is to implement a national pest management plan to help protect Kauri from Phytophthora agathicida, which is one reason why we don't say that very often and generally refer to it as PA. Our overarching direction is to work with Māori in a true Te Tiriti o Waitangi partnership, and we have available to us a number of levers to protect Kauri. Listed there: Mataranga Māori, surveillance, standards, control of large animals, resistance, and Kauri protection areas. We have a co-governance group, and we're operating on a true co-governance way. We have equal members of Māori and non-Māori, and there are two chairs, one's obviously Māori and one's Crown. We've set up a Tiakina Kauri agency team within Biosecurity New Zealand, and we have a number of staff who lead particular portfolios listed there. I won't run through them, they're pretty standard, but they're all new and bringing energy to the Kauri space. As mentioned, the government voted $32 million over 5 years to implement the National Pest Management Plan, starting from the 1st of July 2021. We sat down and worked out with stakeholders, partners and associates exactly how that funding should be allocated and came up with 4 investment PO. These PO we use to distribute the funding that the government has provided. PO 1 is about building capability and capacity of mana whenua to lead Kauri protection. PO 2 is to increase surveillance and monitoring in Kauri forests to support strategic decision making. PO 3 is to build a better bridge between Mataranga Māori research and operational management. And PO 4 is to carry on the necessary mitigation work that's been going for at least 10 or 12 years. Things like hygiene stations, hardening tracks, awareness, behaviour change, community groups, funding, and animal control. Just at a glance, the investments that have been made over the last financial year, we've provided around about 50% to mana whenua groups to build their capability. Northland and Waikato Regional Councils received $1 million each, Bay of Plenty $105, $350 to the Department of Conservation for forest plans and pig control, and $1.1 million into surveillance activities and $500,000 into operational science. There'll be some more distribution to be done before the end of this financial year, and then we'll start thinking about 2022-23. We've been doing quite a bit of work with Puketi Forest. We're treating it as a pilot. We're taking the learnings as much as we can from the Waitakere work that Auckland Council and Te Kawarau Maki have been working on. And we've invested in process around building partnership with mana whenua in collaboration with the other agencies. Largely driven by COVID and the inability for us to travel freely around Kauri lands, but also a very good working model that we hope to implement in other places in the next year and beyond. So, the National Pest Management Plan. It's the first National Pest Management Plan focused on a taonga species. Normally they're focused on economic activities like kiwi fruit or TB. It's the strongest form of protection available under the Biosecurity Act to help protect Kauri from the disease. And it's resulting from a large public consultation process in 2018-19. A draft in National Pest Management Plan and frequently asked questions are available on the MPI website, so feel free to look at that. And before the NPMP comes into force, which we think will be about August 2022 now, we're going to run a series of roadshow workshops around local communities to gather up people's thoughts on a bottom-up approach to the National Operational Plan. So stay tuned for more news on that in your locality. The National Pest Management Plan has a number of rules, and these rules will aid reporting of potential Kauri disease presence. They'll outline what to do when undertaking planning and hygiene practices in high-risk places, and they'll introduce minimum requirements where Kauri grow. But the MPMP is much more than just rules. The rules are the recognised tip of the iceberg, and they'll be the thing that people will encounter first and foremost. However, the MPMP also contains numerous objectives which set out the intent and the effort of all parties to be combined into a single activity to protect a species. It aims to reduce harmful effects of PA on the relationship of Māori to their world and protect Kauri forests. There are 10 principal measures in the National Pest Management Plan to be delivered in partnership with Hapu and Iwi, with significant emphasis on surveillance and monitoring. In addition, we've formed specific tag groups to set direction to deliver the measures. We want all our work to be underpinned by science and mataranga Māori. The rules are available for you to look at on the web, so I won't run through those. And I'll finish now with just demonstrating our address for any further inquiries. We are rebuilding the website and implementing a new brand along with the National Pest Management Plan. So it's a very positive time for Kauri protection. Thank you very much for your time, and I'll leave it there.
Well, kia ora. So that was a shame Alan couldn't join us today, but over the years we've had many agencies take on the fraught on-the-ground management in terms of agency for Kauri dieback. It's a huge task, so we wish the Kauri Protection Agency all the best for that, and of course Alan and the team in that mahi and also his recovery. So it leaves me with a final wrap-up of the Kauri Land Summit, and you can't say goodbye haere without having a shout out and ngā mihi to everyone involved today. Firstly, our wonderful chairs. Kia ora, thank you, Sophie. You've been wonderful this afternoon, and Rob Phillips this morning. That was a fantastic chairing session. It's hard to navigate, but you did it wonderfully. You both did it wonderfully, and thank you. Kia ora for that. Our guest speakers, starting with Matuahami Piripi, Jack Craw, Alan, as you've just seen, and also I have to give a shout out to Albie Marsh for stepping in impromptu. So kia ora, Albie. So thank you. All our themes today: control, protect, cure, te whakahononga, risk assessment and ecosystem impacts, and integrated surveillance. All those presenters in those themes with their co-leads have been absolutely sensational. So kia ora to those speakers today. And it wouldn't be anything if it wasn't for mana whenua, the BMAs and beyond, all mana whenua ropu and researchers and knowledge holders who are supporting and leading and contributing to ngā rākau takitaki. Kia ora to everyone there. So I can't say that more than enough, and that this is truly humbling to have your time and involvement in ngā rākau takitaki. The beautiful films you've seen today, I have to give a ngā mihi to Akarero Films, Nāriki Ngātai and Anna Rasmussen. Outstanding. And the brief to cut those films to a length when you had so much amazing footage, wonderful. Kia ora. And so, kia ora for that film. Ngā mihi nui for the people behind the scenes. As we do on the motto, we thank the people in the kitchen. And although we're not, as we're virtual, we have virtual kitchens, but what I mean is in behind Kauri Land Summit are the people that have made this happen today. So I want to acknowledge in ngā mihi the conference company, Joe and the production team, all your producers today. You've solved all sorts of issues and tissues with this platform, and it's just been wonderful to have the conference company support us in today's virtual kōrero. and the Nārako Takitaki team of Becky Ganley, who is the leader of NRT, but Stacey, Brian, Anatia, Aaron McGlinchey, Desi Ramu, our co-directors Sean and Daniel. Kia ora, thank you for all that in behind mahi that you've contributed to today as well. So, and lastly, ngā mihi koutou katoa to everyone who's participated, who've sent in your questions, that have been part of the panels and the discussions. It was such great content that I feel like the time for kōrero and networking and really debating some of those issues like mātauranga and Western science, it would have been great to do some deep dives into that. But alas, but kia ora for your participation, everybody. I hope you enjoyed it. And also, lastly, thanking Holden for this morning, for opening this morning and closing this morning's session, and giving everyone, including Matua Hami, a fantastic welcome. And where there's a welcome and an opening, there's always a closing, and save the best to last. I would love to hand it over to Jan to close us, and anything you want to say before that, Jan. Kia ora.
Kia ora mano tātou tēnā koe, Nick, mō tō mahi, mō tō whakawhanangutanga o tēnei hui. Kia koutou katoa, tēnei te mihi whānui, kia koutou. I'm always impressed and inspired and somewhat overwhelmed by the passion and knowledge and breadth and spread of people who come to this wānanga. So what I really think is that there's an awesome amount of passion and work, and the skill is in collaborating and bringing it together. So well done to all involved today. Kia ora mai tātou, he karakia whakamutunga. Tau ake ki te tau nei, kōrua tupua, kōrua tāwhito. Ngāru I runga, ngāru I raro, ngāru te ihu o tāne. Ko te ihu o tāne, ko tako waka kua tau mai. Ki te whenua tauri kura, tau mai te mauri, tau mai te wānanga, tau mai te maramatanga. Haumi e, hui e, tae ki e. Kia ora mai tātou.